Hi everybody, my name is Jeremy Siskind. I wrote this book, Playing Solo Jazz Piano. And I also wrote 3 books that are part of the Jazz Piano Fundamentals series. This is book 3. It is the newest one. It's a big boy. It's 281 pages, all about modal and modern jazz. And today I want to talk to you about something that is common in many jazz styles, and that is dissonance, okay? And this is kind of my TED Talk, my very unprepared TED Talk. I'm really speaking off the cuff. But one question that I get asked a lot is about dissonance and how much dissonance is too much. And so I want to address that question and show you a few examples. So let's get into it. I'm going to take some notes here, TED Talk style. Okay, so dissonance. First of all, definition. What I think is an erroneous or incomplete definition is dissonance is a harsh or unharmonious sound. Sure. That is partially true. I think a much better reframe of that definition is dissonance is a sound that invites resolution. A sound that invites resolution. So dissonance is less of a definitive characteristic of, let's say, an interval or a chord, and it's more of a temporary state. Okay, so that if we have, you might hear that chord and think, ew, that's dissonant. But you might actually hear that and think, ooh, that's colorful, right? The resolution makes all the difference when it comes to dissonance. We have quite a lot of dissonance in jazz. I think this is the first important thing to realize is that jazz is a style that has a very high quotient of dissonance. Okay, very high quotient of dissonance. Do I really know what the word quotient means? That's very questionable. But what I'm trying to say, and hopefully what you're understanding, is that jazz allows for quite a lot of dissonance. And of course, it's not going to be the same across the board. If you're playing early jazz style, and you're playing, that's going to be very different than if you're playing, Coltrane. Right, every subgenre of jazz is also going to have different levels, different possible dissonance quotients that you can reach before it seems like too much. Now, how do you know when dissonance is going to be too much? And more importantly, let me think of exactly the way I want to frame this question. What are the different factors that are going to determine how dissonant a sound comes off as? And these are important because these are all things that you can control and you might not realize as you're practicing. Okay, so this is the meat of the TED Talk here. So the first one I already referenced, resolution. And this is so important because I sometimes have students who are practicing and they're saying this chord doesn't sound good the way that it is, right? But if you're not practicing it in context, then, a lot of chords are going to be really dissonant. And then when it finds this resolution, then it will sound less dissonant. So keep that in mind. Dissonant sounds need to find their resolution. Same thing, a lot of times we talk about these half diminished chords and we think, ugh, that half diminished chord with a ninth, so bad. In context, pretty okay. The second important thing about context is tempo, okay? I will play very different levels of dissonance for a ballad and for an up-tempo piece. For instance, that half diminished chord that I'm just playing, and if you want to see exactly what I'm playing, it's like an E half diminished, okay? If I'm playing Beautiful Love, and E half diminished is the first chord of Beautiful Love, and we're playing, that's not my favorite. I might not get that gig again. It does have a haunting quality, but it's right on the border of whether it's okay or not. If I'm playing a faster tempo, it doesn't even register as anything problematic. It just kind of passes by. And in fact, maybe it comes across as interesting and colorful. So tempo is definitely a factor. And, I tell this to my students, especially if we're going to alter some dominant chords. The good news is that at a faster tempo, we don't have to agree on alterations because we can have a lot of different dissonances. At a slower tempo, we do need to agree on alterations, but we have enough time to hear and adjust if somebody's playing a different alteration than we are. So that's, to me, how we might manage having different alterations. Like if I play a flat 9 on a dominant chord, the soloist does not. At a fast tempo, here's a C7 flat 9. Right, we don't even hear that there's a conflict between them. But in a ballad, this might become a problem. Your soloist might be upset with you for playing that flat 9 in a ballad. So if I hear that, then I resolve it. Okay, resolution, tempo, simultaneity. That word has so many syllables. Simultaneity. I think that's how you spell it. So in my example for my half diminished chord, let's come back here. You can really hear the dissonance when I play it all together, right? But if I play, so the dissonance is between these two notes, right? That really wants to resolve. But if I play, all of a sudden, I don't even hear dissonance. Right? So part of the issue with dissonance is that it's happening right together. So if we can divide some of these chords up, or, we're not usually comping right on the downbeat when the bass is going to be playing the root. So if we can shift things around rhythmically, that can create, that could soften the dissonance. Another big factor is tone. And I'm going to put with this voicing. And here I don't mean voicing in terms of how we're arranging the notes on the piano. Here I mean how we're arranging the volume of different notes on the piano. Okay, so we get a different sense of dissonance. I'm going to play just a terrible cluster here. Okay, so here this sounds like just an utter mess. I'm going to play those same notes, but bring out a note. It's still going to sound dissonant, but now it's not going to sound like such a mess, I hope. Is it still dissonant? Yeah, it's definitely still dissonant. Don't get me wrong. But at least it's got some focus now. And if this were like a diatonic cluster, okay, or even, that's a little bit more dissonant. All right, so that just kind of sounds blah. If we start bringing out that top note, the dissonance doesn't register as much. One of my favorite examples of this is from a recording by John Taylor and Norma Winston. If you haven't heard of them, two of my absolute favorite musicians. They're both British. They were married for a time. John Taylor is an incredible pianist who is on the ECM label. Norma Winston, spelled with a Winstone, like Win Stone, but it's pronounced Winston, is an incredible vocalist. And they have this version of Alice in Wonderland. Okay, and John Taylor starts with the interval that you're not supposed to start with, a minor ninth. This is the one thing that I tell students, like, that is the interval to avoid. Right. Sucks. And he doesn't resolve it at all. He plays this. What is he doing? He's playing it with a beautiful tone. He's not playing that. He's playing. And then he's surrounding it with these crystalline, colorful sounds. But it just goes to show you how playing with a good sound on the piano, and that, is years and years, decades and decades of work, makes all the difference. And this also brings us to my last point, which is that if we surround the dissonance with consonants, it can really soften it. And for me, the best example here is when we have a flat 9 in a dominant chord. So it's that same interval, a minor ninth, that we, almost always avoid, right? But we do this all the time in a dominant chord. And we don't even clock it as dissonant, I don't think. Part of the reason is, of course, because it resolves. But I think the reason why this sounds so much less dissonant than that is because we're adding thirds everywhere, right? What is a diminished chord? What is this chord other than just a lot of notes organized in thirds? And adding that consonants in helps to soften the dissonance. I want to show you, So those are the 5 things to keep in mind. Resolution, tempo, simultaneity, tone and voicing, and then adding in consonants to soften the dissonance. There's a million spots that we could look at, but I want to look at this spot in Autumn Leaves in the first ending. This is like such a great thing to talk about with minor keys, but in short, this chord really should be B flat 7, flat 9, because it's leading to E minor, and we always use dominant 7th flat 9s to lead to E minor. Why is it not flat 9? Well, look in the melody. We have a C sharp, the natural 9, in the melody. And that's there for a really good reason, because we'd have a really awkward jump from C to D sharp, right, if we had that flat 9th. So the melody's on one path, it's going up a C sharp. The harmonies should be on another path, I would argue. What do we do? Well, I think knowing... I'm going to comp using that flat 9th because I think it sounds better. But I'm not going to play it simultaneously with that C sharp. I'm going to play it kind of short. And let's see how it sounds, okay? This is like my magic trick. I want you to be able to see what I'm playing. So I'm going to play this voicing. It's got a C natural in it, obviously. I don't think you hear dissonance at all, right? And in fact, what did I play in the middle there? This sounds awful on its own. In context, because it's going by fast and it's resolving immediately, sounds really good. And I want to get back to, I guess we haven't talked so much about why it matters that we can use dissonance and how we use it. And the short reason why it matters is because dissonance sounds good. We're so limited if we're wringing our hand over every little dissonance that we have. In fact, we want to create lots of dissonance in here because it brings in color. Okay, so with these rules in mind, don't go and, harmonize the melody. That's not good use of dissonance. It doesn't resolve. It's simultaneous. It is not played with a good tone. And it's breaking all the rules. So with these rules in mind, however, we can use dissonance. Let's go to one more example. Let's look at this D7. And what if I make this chord, just because I like the sound of it, a flat 9? Now, you would think you absolutely shouldn't do that. There's a natural 9 in the melody. And in fact, that flat 9 is also going to be a half-step conflict with the D in the melody, right? E flat is the flat 9, is right between these two. But let's see if it works. Right. I played that chord. Could I play it even more? Yeah, we could really use a flat 9 chord against the melody if we're smart about it. So I want you to go off and create those dissonances. And if you like this video, if you watched all the way to the end, why don't you comment with the word resolution, because that's really the important thing. And if you enjoy this kind of nerdery, you're going to really like the Jazz Piano Fundamental series. You're going to really like playing solo jazz piano. So pop over to jeremysiskind.com. Get yourself a little gift. You deserve it. All right, guys. See you later.